One of the problems of modern progressive leftist liberals is the same problem that many intellectual academics have. People who have no real world experience to give them any real practical expertise in the area they are trying to teach about, which causes them to say things that are simply not true and have no practical real world application, and often make the person sound as if they aren't a part of the real world and live in a bubble, because they do. And what's interesting is one of these theories is that sexuality is such a broad spectrum. That might have been true once upon a time, back when people were actually having sex. But now, the way that I see it as a former sex educator, sexuality is no longer a spectrum, but a simple binary. That is internet sexuality on one side and real world sexuality on the other. And so on the one hand, you have people who have created a very broad concept of sexuality that only exists on the internet and doesn't actually exist where sex is happening between two people, and cannot exist there because it is just fantasy. It's intellectual masturbation that just simply doesn't take place in the real world, right? And so the only types of sexuality that exist in the internet are the ones that stay on the internet. Masturbating to porn, engaging in the reading or watching of fantasies, and most of all, talking about sexuality as an abstract concept, such as sexual identity politics, that has no real world practical application. It doesn't help two people to have sexual intercourse. And then on the other hand, you have your real world forms of sexuality, which only exists where two people are engaging in some form of sexual interaction. So usually, not always, but usually these two things are mutually exclusive and do not exist together. They cannot exist together most of the time. Now, there are some times where they certainly do intersect. You can certainly talk about sex online in a way that does apply to the real world, but we have seen that becoming less and less and less true as time goes on, and these quote-unquote progressives cause sexuality to progress in a manner that no longer is able to take place in the real world and to help two people to sexually interact. All right? So that's the way I see this quote sexuality spectrum now. It's not really a spectrum so much as it is a binary. There is real world sex, and then there's internet-based abstract quote-unquote sexuality. And unfortunately, for all of us people out there who are social animals and thus sexual beings, these two things are not equal in our lives. One of them is natural in the way we are supposed to experience sex, and the other is unnatural. One of them is healthy and good for us, and the other is unhealthy and bad for us. And one of them is becoming old-fashioned, and the other one is marginalizing it and taking over our lives. Can you guess which of the two is which? If you can't, I'll tell you. Real world sex is natural and healthy, something that we are made to have and is supposed to be a part of our lives. and internet-based abstract sexuality is unnatural and unhealthy. But unfortunately, it is the one that is taking over and causing most people out there to have less sex and actually be less sexual, as it imposes more abstract sexual ideologies on us under the guise of this supposed spectrum that it says we belong to, which seems like it is improbable if that spectrum is causing us to actually be less sexual and have less sex in the real world, and probably coincides with the population decline. So that is the new sexual binary you need to be aware of. All right, there is only two forms of sex and sexuality when it comes down to the fundamentals. There's that which takes place on the internet and not in the real world, and that which takes place in the real world and not in the internet. And only the latter is actually good for you. So keep that in mind. That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix and the matriarchy controlling it and learn everything you need to know about female on male sexism, get your copy of my newly released book called Misandry Exposed, on sale now for a special price that won't last long. So check it out by clicking the link below. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.